we're not Obi, in case you didn't notice. Obi's actually traveling for work this week and has asked Kaylee and I'm Colleen, by the way, if we haven't met, asked Kaylee and I to host for him in his stead. So we're here today to talk about Pattern. We're really excited. Which actually, let me know, which she probably checked you in. She's great. She probably helped you fill out your name tag. She let me know that you guys had some really good answers on your name tags. Does anybody want to shout out what they put? The prompt was, what's a pattern you're trying to, what is it?
Developing.
Pattern you're developing in your life. Did anybody have a good one?
Yes.
In the back.
I was late and mine was 5 minutes.
Thank you, Amanda. I want that for you too. I'm just kidding. Anybody else have any good ones they want to share? Yeah.
Adding rhythm to my routine.
Ooh, adding rhythm. Ooh, that could be interpreted so many ways. I love it. I love it. Any other good ones? We'll take one more. One more from the audience.
Yes.
Mindfulness. Love it. These are good. These are good answers. Good for a Friday morning before you've had your coffee yet, because we did name tags before coffee, and that can always be tricky. All right. So we're here because Bittersweet Creative took Obi from us. Just kidding. We love Bittersweet. Bittersweet is our local partner. They help us make everything happen from getting name tags, which, oh my gosh, you guys, if you have not bought name tags, like these labels in a while, they are so expensive. I was like, what in the world? I went to Staples, it was like $100 for a pack of name tags. I was like, this is highway robbery. But we're really grateful to Bittersweet. They're a creative agency that does work around rejecting cynicism, defying apathy, and celebrating good. So Obi is out telling wonderful stories this week. We are sad to miss him, but glad to be here anyway. Bittersweet is also always looking for stories of organizations that are doing just that work, doing good around the world. So if you work for somewhere, or you have friends that work somewhere, or you know somebody that's doing something really positive in the world, you can nominate them here. All you have to do is just put in what you know about them, and Bittersweet will do the rest to tell their story. Other partners of ours are Plants Alive. Plants Alive is a plant shop in Maryland that, you can go visit. You could talk to Amari wherever he is about them, because I don't know as much. He told me to tell you all that Plants Alive is a plant shop in Maryland that does community work and arts and shit. That's a quote from Amari. So if you want to know more, you should probably talk to him and not me. Also, Charlestown AV. Shout out to Chris in the back, who is generously donating his time and talent to film this so that people can watch it if they didn't attend. Yeah. Great. We love Charlestown. And to Planet Word for hosting us today. Yeah. Yes. I've heard from multiple people that this is their favorite Creative Mornings venue. Is that true for anybody else in the room? Raise your hand if this is your favorite. Wow. So nice.
Raise your hand if this is your first.
Oh, there you go. All right, yeah. We're really grateful so my job here, I volunteer. We all volunteer, let's be real. But what I do for Creative Mornings is partnerships. So building some of these really fun relationships around the city with groups that just want to host us or give us money or give us food or coffee or things like that. So if you know of a space or a place or a person or a chef or a whatever that wants to support the creative community in DC, please come talk to me, because we're always looking for more partners. But we're really grateful for Planet Word. This is a relationship that came out of our community. Jason Reynolds, who some of you know, I don't think he's here today, I didn't see him. But he connected us, and so we're here. This is our second time here, and we're really, really glad to be here. Also thanks to, this is awkward because this is us
We're thanking ourselves.
But the rest of the team also, we couldn't do this without a team of dedicated volunteers who put in time and work out of their days to to serve you all and to make this happen so that you guys can have a free space to come and meet each other and talk and be inspired. So we're really
And if you'd like to join us, talk to Amari. Hand up in the back.
He knows all the things. He knows about the plants and the volunteers. A man of many talents. Also, for those of you who didn't know so it was a lot of people who said there was their first time. Creative Mornings, this is our DC chapter, but there are chapters actually all around the world of Creative Mornings. I know Amanda back there who's working on timeliness. She was part of, which chapter were you part of when you were in India? Bangalore chapter. So if you find yourself in a different city or you move to a different city, even temporarily, and you're looking for a creative community, there's probably a Creative Mornings chapter near you, and you can look that up at creativemornings.com. So everybody around the world is talking to the same theme this month. It's actually really cool. You can also go online and look at talks from other chapters around the world and see how they interpreted the theme for the month. Also online are our virtual field trips. This is a very underutilized part of Creative Mornings, but something where you can go kind of along on a journey with other creatives around the world and visit different places virtually. It's very cool. Highly recommend. How many of you were at our event last month? Yeah, at 6 and I with Josh was great. The Magnolia, honestly, have not stopped thinking about that Magnolia since then. It's been a month. If you weren't there, Josh had this humongous Magnolia from his yard, and it smelled delightful, and it's just on my brain now. I can't stop thinking about it. And let's ignore that really awkward photo of me in this and go to the next slide, and Kaylee will introduce our theme.
Hi, everyone. Our theme this month is Pattern, which was brought to us by our Chennai, India chapter. And this is our lovely image for this. And I'm going to introduce our speaker. So, Sahil Rahman is the co-founder of Rasa, a growing fast casual Indian restaurant brand in DC that is focused on opening minds through the power of food. Raise your hand if you've been and eaten their lovely food. Yes, the whole crowd. The whole crowd. That is correct. He was named an Eater Young Gun in 2018 and is a recipient of the 2021 WBJ Diversity in Business Awards and the 2021 Rising Terp Award from his alma mater, the best school, the University of Maryland. Go Terps. Terps in the house? Woo! We love it. He's also named a Thrillist Local Hero and a Local Changemaker by Washington City Paper for his role in supporting the community during the pandemic with Rasa. Born to Indian parents from two different religious backgrounds and influenced deeply by travels across our world, he has spent his life building bridges and breaking down barriers between communities, ideas, and individuals. Sahil believes that food is the gateway to culture and looks to share the flavors of his childhood as a vehicle for connection, empathy, and curiosity. So please, welcome.
Well, a big thank you to Kaylee and Colleen, and thank you to all of you for being here. It is Friday morning at like 8:30 a.m., and there are so many smiling faces and so many fashionable people. Everyone is I don't know if you've looked around the room, but everyone is looking so fabulous. We've even got a dancing baby in the back. There's all sorts of good energy in this space, and truly, it's a real honor to be here, especially in Planet Word. I don't know if anyone's been here before, but what a cool concept to have a museum dedicated to the idea of the spoken word, the written word, and the way that our language impacts us. So I have to acknowledge when Obi and Ray first reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to speak at Creative Mornings? The topic that they asked me if I wanted to speak on was titled Spicy. Now, being that many of you have been to our restaurant, thank you, by the way, I thought, okay, this will be pretty easy, right? We've got hot sauce, we've got all these spicy curries, we can pull this together pretty quickly. And I've got to be honest, when it emerged that patterns was the topic that wanted to be spoken, it was so vulnerable. I can't tell you what a beautiful, messy, and complex topic it is. I started seeing patterns everywhere. I felt like I was in some sort of 3D movie where I'm walking around and I'm like, oh my gosh, I walk like this. Right? You're looking around and you're saying, oh my God, the way humans interact, the way that our society functions, the way that all of these different pieces move together. It was like really exciting, but I felt like I went so incredibly wide that I was totally overwhelmed. Shout out to my girlfriend Morgan here, who has been so incredibly kind in this process. And as I was trying to figure out where do I want to take this, I sat down and I wrote on literally a chit from the restaurant, what is a pattern? A pattern, as I see it, is an event or occurrence that is witnessed and repeated. Why is it important to notice patterns? Noticing patterns is in our nature. It helps us understand the ways in which the world works, the natural flow of things, and the order in which the universe arranges. In noticing these patterns, we're seeking to understand ourselves, our communities, and our systems that inform our experience of the world. Patterns are reflections of our inner and outer realities, mirrors of both the moment and the mystery, guides along the way. And as I started establishing my own definition of patterns, I began to think a lot about what if I started with myself? It was too much to look in every direction, and so I said, let me start by looking at who I am. And I'll start a little bit with how we got here. So I want to name that this handsome gentleman here with the mustache is actually in the second row. Shout out to Chef Vinod. Chef Vinod is my business partner Rahul's father and a second father to me. And he is the man, the mind, and the hand behind all of the delicious flavors at Rasa. So he was here at like 8:15 and so excited. And it's just, it's a real joy to have him here today. And yeah, I want to start by sharing a little bit about myself. So I was born here. Anyone from Montgomery County? Nobody? Okay, yeah. So I was born in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And and growing up, I was this Indian kid trying to fit in, right? And it was even more confusing because I was born half Hindu, half Muslim, and 100% confused. And as I'm kind of feeling my way through the awkward phases of growing up, one of the ways in which I really felt this strong desire to fit in was actually around food. You know, today, being Indian is really cool. Right? Like, everyone's trying to go to an Indian wedding, everyone's talking about turmeric, and like, you know what I mean? It's like kind of sexy right now. When I was a kid, that was not the case. You know, growing up, it was much more like, thank you, come again from The Simpsons, and we've got Indiana Jones in that like iconic scene where they pull up the plate and it's just like monkey brain stew. And that was kind of how people perceived Indian food. You know, they all thought, it's curry, it's spicy, it burns twice, right? Like once on the way in, once on the way out. And as a result, it was one of the first parts of my own personality that I began to numb. I distinctly remember going to my mom one day and saying, so from here on out, we're going to do turkey sandwiches and Lunchables. If you could take me to Taco Bell, that's what all the cool kids are doing. And I really, despite growing up, so my family's owned Indian restaurants since I was a year old. Bombay Bistro is 32 years old. I'm 33. And yeah, if anyone's in Rockville, Bombay Bistro is incredible. We just launched a brunch. And, and from a very, very young age, I was surrounded by such good food, but I began to push that away. And in pushing that away, I not only pushed the food away, but I really began to push myself away. I started pushing my own inner knowing and my own culture away. And it feels sort of awkward to say on stage, but I just wanted to be one of the white kids, right? Like full on, it was like, I just want to be accepted. I remember thinking after soccer practice one day, like all the other kids get to go to church. I wish I could go to church. That place sounds like a blast. And I'm sorry for all of you who had to go to church. And so as I'm growing up, there's a certain point where I realized something's not adding up. You know, the food of our families, we loved the flavors. We thought it was healthy. We thought it was delicious. There were so many good vegetarian options. And so I would start bringing my non-Indian friends to the family restaurant. Now, some of them would come kicking and screaming. We were like, come on, you're not going to come to my family spot? Like, you got to give it a shot. And as people would come, what we found was that people would leave completely evangelized. I mean, these are people who, they kind of grew up on meat and potatoes. They necessarily didn't have the exposure that I had. But when we'd bring them in, we'd ask them what they liked. We'd order them something. And they loved the food so much that they actually started coming back for birthdays, for graduations, and as we got older, even first dates. And Bombay Bistro and later another one of our family spots in Deek became these places where people started to really open their minds. And it was about this time in high school where I started wondering, like, this doesn't make sense. Why is it that people think they're so scared of this cuisine and culture? Why is it that people think they're so afraid of trying new things? And what I realized was the problem wasn't actually Indian food. The problem was the way that people were being introduced to it. So a lot of Indian restaurants today are like our family restaurant. They're amazing, they're run by incredible people, but they're in like random shopping centers, and when you walk in, there's kind of like sitar music playing and Taj Mahal photos. I'm sorry, Vinod Uncle. Taj Mahal photos, and you're greeted by like a lovely person with a giant mustache, and they give you this 1,000-item menu, and it says stuff like Bagara Bangan and Sag Makai, and you're like, what in the world does this say? And so what we realized was the problem wasn't actually Indian food, it was the way people were introduced to it. So we really started thinking, how do we take these flavors we grew up loving and share them with more people? So for me, what that looked like was I wrote a business plan in high school. I won $500 from WPGC, 95.5, and it's a great station. If you haven't heard it, you should check it out. And from that point, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. So $500, it wasn't enough money to start the restaurant, and so I ended up going to college, study at the University of Maryland, and go Terps, and while I'm there, I keep thinking about this idea. I get an internship with Outback Steakhouse in Southeast Asia, and I keep trying to learn. Yeah, there's like a lot of Outback Steakhouses in Southeast Asia. It's sort of a fun fact. And yeah, they call it the typhoon bloom out there instead of the bloomin' onion. So I get to my senior year of college, and I'll never forget. It's like the fall semester. My dad calls me, and he's like, "Hey, beta." Beta is what he calls me. It means son, right? And he goes, "Hey, beta, I've been talking to a lot of my friends, and many of their kids are starting to get jobs. I was wondering how that process is going for you." I had not actually applied to any jobs at this point, and so I kind of sheepishly respond to my dad, being like, "So you remember that restaurant idea we've talked about all this time? I was thinking I'd just start that." And there is a long pause, and I hear him take this deep inhale, and he just kind of goes, "With whose money?" it was at this point that I realized my business degree had absolutely failed me because I had not thought about that part. And so I did what every good Indian kid does, and I ended up getting a job at Deloitte. Yes, it's true. And yeah, while I'm working there, I'm just feeling so uncomfortable. It's sort of like a circular peg in a square hole, just like, this doesn't fit. I feel so confined, so constricted. And yeah, in that moment, a good buddy convinces me to move to New York. And this is before, I like to say I started remote working before remote work was a thing. And Deloitte didn't take too fondly to that. So very quickly, I was back in this moment where I needed to figure out, okay, what am I going to do next? Am I going to continue to norm and conform and play small, or am I going to use this as an opportunity to try something new? Am I going to really take the time to do what I believe in, to bet on myself? And so it's about that time where I call Chef's son, Rahul. So Rahul and I have known each other literally since the day I was born. Our dads are business partners. And yeah, Rahul's working in investment banking. I'd been in consulting. We both were kind of unhappy with where we were at. And we said, hey, you know what? If we don't try this, we're going to spend the rest of our lives wondering, what if? What if we had had the courage to take the leap, to try something new, to give it a go? And so we literally, we got a U-Haul together from New York. We moved back home. We set up an office in my family basement, and we were so naive. We had this story that, like, okay, our dads have owned restaurants. We'll be up and running in 6 months. We'll get this going. And I'll never forget our, for those of you who've ever worked in restaurants, it takes 9 months just to get, like, permits in DC. This is a traumatic laugh here. I could hear it. And so I'll never forget, we've been working on our business plan for a couple weeks, and we're saying, okay, it's time to get working on the recipes. So we call Chef, we show up to Bombay Bistro, and we're kind of like, okay, let's like do the recipe thing. Let's do this. And I'll never forget, Chef just looks at Rahul and I, and he goes, I'm not giving you my recipes. Like, what do you think's going on here? He's like, you got to learn how to do this. And so he calls over this big guy named Tito. Tito's been working with us for like 25 years, kind of this big, hulking man. And Tito says, follow me. Okay. And so we follow Tito, and we walk into the kitchen, and Tito just looks over at us. He bends down, and he picks up these two 50-pound bags of onions and slaps them on the table and looks at both of us and says, get chopping. You know, in this moment, Rahul and I are both kind of like, what in the world have we done? You know, and so this really kicks off a long period of us figuring out, how do you actually start a restaurant? And after about 3 years, we finally opened Rasa in December of 2017. And while I'm grateful for the claps, in being vulnerable and honest with you all, I picked one of the most chaotic photos I could find because it feels really emblematic of that experience. I mean, we thought we'd had it all figured out. We wrote all the plans, and it was a total shit show. I mean, we had Chef cooking small batch of sauce in the back. My dad's on cash. My sister's on the dish pit, and my aunt is literally like rolling fresh naans. It is total chaos. And we're just like, oh my God, this is so hard. How are we going to do this? How do we staff? How do we hire? How do we handle all of this? And, you know, and the business is like, it's like going, but it's not really there. And I remember Rahul and I are standing in our little office in the kitchen. By office, I mean like it's like a 1 foot by 1 foot like spot for your laptop. And we're talking and we're trying to figure out, hey, what do we do? How do we make this work? And I look up at the screen, and there's this man that walks in. Rahul and I look at each other. He's like, that guy looks a lot like Tom Sietsema. And for those of you who don't know, Tom Sietsema is he's a very well-known food critic. He writes for the Washington Post, and historically, he's been a make-or-break kind of man for the restaurant industry. And we both were like, there's no way. I mean, he's never reviewed a fast casual. Why would he come here? It's not him. But we're like, why don't we just double check? And so So Chef has sent us this like sneaky photo he took of Tom years ago, because like he's kind of the mystery man. He always like shoulder down, right? And we look at it and we're like, oh fuck, Tom Sietsema is in our restaurant. And unlike a sit down where you can get the dish prepared exactly, you can pick your best server, you can wine and dine. At a fast casual, it's like what you got is what you got. And so we run out there and he's already in line. And we just, this is the first time in my life I think I prayed. It was like 2 weeks go by, we're just sitting with bated breath, and we get a call from Tom. He ends up reviewing Rasa, and not only is it a glowing review, but he actually puts us in his fall dining guide, which he had never done for a fast casual before. And for those of you who haven't been to the restaurant before, this is the space. This is some family stuff situation here. But yeah, Tom's review really catapulted us forward. A lot of the challenges we'd started to experience began to shift. All of a sudden, it went from the chaos of how do we keep the lights on to the chaos of like, okay, things are growing. How do we keep up with the demand? This is awesome. And we start rolling. We decide to raise a little bit of money to open up restaurants number 2 and 3. We beat out all these brands for these great sites, and we're feeling really, really good about ourselves. And we'd kind of gotten into this pattern of like, okay, things are really moving. We're on the track we've always wanted to be on. And, that was when COVID happened. It was a really, really interesting period. We were slated to open restaurant number 2 in March of 2020 and restaurant number 3 in May of 2020. Obviously not ideal timing. And, we've spent all of this money, we've spent all this time, and at that point we can't even open the doors to our restaurant, right? We can't even have guests sitting inside. And so, this is out of place. Oopsie. And yeah, so we get really involved in the community. We start by providing free meals to medical workers and school children. We start just thinking, I saw Ford was giving out ventilators. We said, what can we do? So we said, let's produce meals. And what we found was that we were able to produce a lot of meals very quickly, very cost effectively that were good for you. And so we ended up calling our friends at World Central Kitchen. We said, hey, look, we can do a lot of meals. We can do healthy food. We can do it at an affordable price point, but we don't know who needs the meals. We don't know how to get it to them. And we've got to cover our costs just a little bit. As fate would have it, the kitchen said, we have money, we know who needs it, we've got distribution, can you start tomorrow? And so we and Maidan, another DC restaurant, were actually the first 2 restaurants in the country that began with working with World Central Kitchen to pilot this program. And while it felt really good and it's getting applause and it's sexy and all of this kind of stuff, I have to also acknowledge that perhaps, like you, that period of the pandemic was absolutely brutal for me. It was we were finding meaning and we were surviving and we were supporting in the community as we could. But on a personal level, I was just gutted, right? I was struggling with a lot of the social unrest. I was struggling with figuring out how to keep our team employed. Our families, we'd poured so much of our souls, our families had poured so much of their resources into making this dream for Rasa happen, and it just didn't seem like there was a path forward. I'd gotten out of a multi-year relationship. It just felt like, oh my gosh, the world is kind of closing in. I couldn't breathe. And after a couple years of navigating that intensity and that feeling, I just knew there was more to life, and I knew that I had to do something to break the patterns I was stuck in. I had to do something to move and shake and get out of where I was feeling so stuck. And so I flashed back to a conversation with a gentleman who's actually spoken at Creative Mornings, Rob Duncan from Dolcezza. And Rob had told me about an experience he had had with ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is a pretty sacred vine that is grown in the Amazon and is part of a lot of indigenous communities, and it's used ceremonially in healing. And I'd heard a lot of really intense stuff about this plant and this medicine. There's a lot of like stories of, oh my gosh, people like vomit or they have to run to the bathroom. And I was like pretty nervous, but at this point I was kind of like, I'm ready to do whatever it takes. I know this isn't it, right? I want to figure out, how do I shift something inside, because the way I was, the patterns that I was stuck in were killing me. And so I go down with all these fears of the unknown. And of course, the first thing we do at 7 a.m. is something called a vomitivo, which is what it sounds like. It is a party of purging, if you will. And I go into this 7-day retreat, this ceremony, just really, really looking for answers. And there's so many personal anecdotes that came up, so many different dreams and stories. But underneath it all, what really emerged was this knowing and this awareness of the toxicity that I had been holding in my body, the toxicity that had been brewing all around us, that so many of us have been steeped in. There was just such an intensity to the feeling, especially in that period. And even today, as we look around, there's like, God, the patterns and the way that we're living, the way that we treat each other, the way that we relate to work, the way that we treat our families, the way that we treat our planet. It was just like, oh my God, I don't know that I'd ever felt such a sense of disgust. It was just so intense. And as I was feeling that, the awareness came into me as well that I had really abandoned my own body, my own inner animal, my own felt sense, and my own knowing. And as I was sitting with this, I end up finding this coconut. And it really captured the energy I was feeling in that moment. So there's actually no point to that outside of it just feeling like a fun existential coconut moment for me. But it was really intense. And there I was, having had what felt like my whole sense of reality and perception both expanded and shattered. It was almost like a death and rebirth of sorts. And I was just sitting with, okay, I'm aware of these old patterns, but what are the new ones? What do I do with this awareness? What happens from here? And while I could spend time telling you more about my own story and the way that things shifted for me, I actually want to kind of check into the energy of that moment and ask you all the question that we started with on your name tags, right? Of what patterns are you seeing in your own world, right? What patterns are you seeing in your friendships, in your family, in your work, in your communities, in your country, right? Like, what are those patterns? What are the ones that feel really true to you? What are the little voices that whisper, hey, this is something that needs to change? Or, hey, let's dive more into this. And so I actually am going to invite us to just take 3 to 5 minutes to sit with that question. What patterns are you seeing in your world? As I was thinking about that question for myself, I came across this quote which hit me like a ton of bricks. It said that it's much easier to change yourself than it is to change the world. And by changing yourself, you change the world. In this moment when I had felt so much of the sickness in the society, when I was feeling so much of the different parts of me that I was struggling with, seeing the different systems and structures and patterns, that I was like, where do I even begin? This quote really gave me a roadmap. And so I began to really work on myself and on my own patterns. I began to take care of my body. I began to take care of my mind. And I really began to shift my own patterns. And what I'm really curious about now is, what did you learn? I found that as I was in the process of changing a number of my own patterns, changing the way the little voice in my brain, I don't know if any of you have that little voice that's sometimes not that nice, in changing all of those patterns, I found that actually taking the time to notice the patterns, and then just as importantly, to actually speak them out loud, to actually be witnessed and to be heard by a dear friend, a family member, someone in the community, or literally a stranger on a park bench, being able to be heard in what I was experiencing, what I was noticing, what I was feeling, it managed to take away some of the power that pattern had over me. And so I'd actually like you to now find a partner, right? Maybe someone you're sitting next to, maybe it's an old friend, maybe it's someone you've never met. But what I'd like to do is take the next few minutes, we'll do kind of 2 minutes for each person to just share, and again, whatever feels safe, whatever feels comfortable, there's no obligation here, but to take a moment to actually share, what was it that you learned? What surprised you? What scared you? What excited you? What were some of the emotions that you were feeling? What were some of the patterns that want to be named in your life? What feels in motion, right? And so what I'd like to do is we'll have you pair off with just one other partner, and the person with the longest hair can go first. I'll kind of cue you on. I'll cue you on when to swap, right? But why don't we just take a couple minutes, say hi to your neighbor, and we can start on my cue.
Thank you, good students in the room.
Wow.
Former students.
That was amazing. So how did that feel? How did that feel to take a moment to share? What was it like to meet someone, to share what it is that's happening in your heart, what it is that's happening in your head, in your body, in your life? What was it to be heard? What was it to listen? To actually take the time to process not only the patterns in your life, but the gifts that the person you were speaking with may have been offering you. We are all interconnected, and often the patterns that someone else might be reflecting, they might actually be something for you to reflect on as well. And so before we carry on, I'm just really curious, is anyone willing to share? Is there anyone who was surprised or noticed something or learned something that feels just kind of eager or compelled to, or willing to share what their experience of that was? Amy?
Okay. Taking accountability on the patterns of perception of like what I'm seeing is what I'm experiencing versus like staying in the past and saying that the present is based off of the past versus like similar to what you said, being expansive and open to new patterns.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Does anyone else, that totally relates for me. I don't know if anyone else, what Amy just shared resonates, but taking the time to actually reflect on the patterns in our lives and being aware of them. Is there anyone else that is willing to share?
I think it was both vulnerable and freeing to talk to someone you've never met before. If it goes great, fantastic. Maybe you made a new friend. If you just made a fool of yourself, you never have to see them again. And I found it striking how little context one had to share to have a meaningful conversation.
What's your name?
Joanna.
Joanna, thank you so much for sharing. You know, it's really interesting. What shows up for me as you share that is a reflection from the last speaker, Josh Kogan. So Josh, outside of being an incredible ethnobotanist and filmmaker and photographer, also helps curate men's groups, where I'd actually met Sam. And you know, there seems to be this absolutely direct correlation between vulnerability and connection. Right? It's really funny when you think about it. There's often such a fear in being open. I don't know, maybe I'll just speak for myself here, but perhaps like you, I often am scared if I like really show people who I am, what if they don't like me? Right? Like, what if they judge me? What if they say mean things about me? What if they run away? What if, right? And what I've found without fail is that every time I choose to be vulnerable, every time someone else chooses to be vulnerable with me, it creates so much more connection, right? It creates so much more safety, so much more depth. And it's just like, oftentimes I think we all walk around the world with these masks on, right? And pretending I'm this businessman, right? Or I'm, you know, like I'm this way or that way or whatever that might be. And I think that, Joanna, to your point, being able to just, even for a moment, take off that mask and be open and be vulnerable is so huge, especially in a moment where so many of us are craving that connection. Loneliness is at an all-time high, and yet it can be this simple, right? To just open up to someone new or to someone you know. So to close it out, is there one more share that's wanting?
So what I shared was that when I started therapy, my therapist had an Audre Lorde quote that I don't want to misquote, so I pulled it up. Our feelings are our most genuine past knowledge. And I read it and was like, oh, that's nice. I didn't think anything of it until months, years of therapy, and realizing that I am very out of touch with my own feelings. And the pattern that I have is that I've always prioritized other people's feelings before my own. So being confronted for the first time well into my life that the pattern I needed to create was to start listening to my own feelings and not holding responsibility for how everyone around me was feeling, yet ignoring myself in the process.
I just watched a whole room of people nod. I think everyone feels really, really, really seen in that. So thank you for sharing. And, you know, to bring it together, I'm just really curious about what happens if the pattern breaks, right? These patterns that are running our lives, whether they're patterns we love or patterns that we're really struggling with, right? Like, what happens if the pattern breaks? Oftentimes, we glorify these stories of someone has something awful that happens to them or something really hard or really unexpected, and they go through, you know, it's like the classic hero's journey, right? They go through hell and all of this kind of stuff. It feels true on my end. Today, Rasa's thriving, and we're in a really good space, and I'm personally in such a powerful spot, and I feel so grateful for that journey. But I wonder what if the pattern breaks, and does it always have to be this really dramatic, intense, hardcore ayahuasca experience or whatever it might be that's gonna like show you dragons and snakes and tigers and break you open, right? And that's cool and it's fun and it's amazing. And I'm also wondering, what would it look like if instead of waiting, we just chose to break the pattern now? So I want to thank you all for your time today. It's been wonderful to meet you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Yes, thank you. I think we have a few minutes. You want to do Q&A?
Yeah,
Okay. You want that? Okay.
Okay.
That's for you. Great. All right, questions?
And we'll get you a mic in just 1 second.
Hi, this was great. Thank you so much for being here. My question is around, so I'm a designer, so I'm very interested in the branding of Rasa. I think that's like one thing that really stands out to me when I go in the restaurant is all the vibrant colors and the fonts. And so I'm just kind of interested about the process of how you came to that branding and like what was the message you were trying to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your name?
Amelia.
Amelia, thanks for being here. So it was a really long and arduous process. We worked with a design agency initially, and they just kept giving us what felt like really generic pieces of work, and it just didn't feel like it spoke to who we were or who we wanted to be. I kept getting feedback that like we just wanted this really vibrant, colorful logo, and we kept being told you can only have one color. We actually chose 5. But literally everyone was like, no, you've got to stay in this mold. This is how Chipotle's done it. This is how Panda Express has done it, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, cool, we don't care, right? Like, we're not those brands. We want to be who we are. We want to do something new. We want to do something fresh. And so we started with the logo. And the word rasa, it means the essence of, getting to the core of something, whether that's taste, flavor, or even human emotion. And in a lot of Indian spiritual practice, there's this idea of the 9 rasas, or the 9 essential human emotions. So it's like no one emotion is good or bad, but it's just being aware of where you're at in that process. And so we actually broke our logo into 9 different pieces as a homage to the 9 rasas. And I have to acknowledge the name Rasa actually was a combination of Rahul and Sahil, and we Googled it, and it had this like awesome meaning. But it was a real process. So it started with the logo, and then we thought a lot about how do we take, yeah, and the media and the press, I'm like, it means taste and flavor in Sanskrit, you know? But yeah, we really thought about how do we translate the vibrancy, the fun, the color, the chaos of India, not only with the logo, but with our physical spaces. So we think of ourselves as the front door for Indian culture and Indian cuisine. So literally, my aunt in New Delhi built all of our doors in her basement and ships them from New Delhi to DC. And we even, we've got the strings that are moving in the space to show the movement and chaos of India. The boxes in the restaurant are meant to be the top of a mandala. And inside the boxes, we fill them with South Asian artists and authors. And even the paintings on the walls, we want to really be very intentional about our design.
Good morning, Sahil. Thank you, first of all, just for sharing your beautiful light and energy and delicious food. I can't stop thinking about those curried chickpeas and green beans that you had on the screen earlier. We talked about Josh, who is our mutual friend, and he says something. He says that fitting in is the opposite of belonging. He says that a lot. Fitting in is the opposite of belonging. And you talked a little bit about being, what Josh calls being like a third culture kid, who I am as well, right? Neither here nor exactly there, but somewhere in the brackish waters in between. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about your journey when, in adolescence, all we crave is fitting in, right? We want our lunch to look like everyone else's. We want our parents to look like everyone else's. We want, we don't want to have to tell our friends they have to take off their shoes and explain what a samovar is and all this shit. But how did you navigate that space, as you came? Because clearly you are a man who is like really steeped now in his belonging, not necessarily craving fitting in. So that's kind of my question.
Thank you. It's really interesting. The process of preparing for this speech was just like excruciating. I don't know if you've ever done anything like this before. This is the first time for me, and I was just pulling my hair out, couldn't sleep, trying to figure out how does this actually work. And when I reflect on what was happening there for me, I found that I was just like, why are you so nervous? You've talked to much bigger crowds about Rasa, you've done all of this other stuff. And I realized that same fifth grade boy who was so insecure about his own food and wanting to fit in was kind of popping back up this week in a way that I haven't felt in so long. It's like, I thought we were past this. And I'll be honest that right now, this feels like an active process for me of bringing belonging, not only hopefully to the people here, but also to myself. So it's a very ongoing question, and I'm honored to be in it with you.
Hi. Thank you so much for your great talk. It was wonderful. My name is Madi, and I was wondering, you mentioned inner knowing. What does that mean to you, and how do you connect with your inner knowing?
Gosh, like when I do Rasa interviews, it's usually like, what's your EBITDA? You know? So for me, in the last few years, I've begun to develop a meditation practice, and I've also stopped drinking. And I say that because my own sense of inner knowing has really dramatically shifted just in the last like 12 to 14 months. I can't overemphasize how much the practice of meditation and having that space to actually just observe what's going on has been impactful. But actually just as impactful, I realized I was like numbing my knowing for so long. You know, like with different substances like alcohol, not in like an abusive way, but just like it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and we're going out, right? And just that continual process and not actually taking the space to pause and giving my body time to rest and reflect really impacted my sense of inner knowing. And yeah, this feels weird to say out loud on a stage, but in the last few months, this really interesting thing has happened where I don't know who is speaking, but the chatter in my mind has begun to slow, and instead I've just been getting directions. It's really odd. I'll be like walking, and it'll say turn left. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to go right. And it's like, no, turn left. And what I've found is when I'll take that turn, I'll bump into the exact person I was hoping to meet, or the exact thing I was looking for ends up being right there. And I've just started to see so many beautiful synchronicities all around me as I've been able to start listening to that inner knowing. And so, yes, I would say like really start listening to that voice in your head if you can, right? Make sure you're clear on which voice is speaking, which is the tricky part, right? But it's been amazing because sometimes there's these, I should do this, I should do that, I should go here, I should go there. And sometimes we just have things that don't make sense that come to our mind, right? It's like, I really feel like doing this right now, but you're like, people will judge me, I'll feel questionable, this, that, whatever. And I'd actually invite you to, I think we all have our own inner knowing if we can be quiet enough to listen to it. And so I'd really invite you to not only listen to it and find that clarity, but when it comes, to actually listen to its guidance, because it can lead to really, really beautiful places.
We've got time for one more question.
Good morning. My name is Melly. Thank you for being here. I really appreciated your conversation. And my question is related to the fact that I'm an educator, and I am wondering, what would you have wanted from an educator in your life as that fifth grader?
Here I was thinking, I made it through the speech, you know? I think I would have wanted someone to see me, right? Someone to recognize that the experience of the world that I was having was different from what other people were having. And, you know, I think fifth grade is such an interesting timing, right? Because it feels like the point where we stop going from just these like free-spirited, like frolicking little kids dancing around and making up games and just playing to starting to become like we're just starting to get towards puberty. We're getting a little bit more self-conscious. And I think that right around that time is when our guards start to go up. It feels like the point at which we begin to lose connection from that inner knowing. It sort of feels like the space where instead of just the pure vulnerability and joy, we begin worrying about perception. And so I think the two things that show up for me would be, yeah, absolutely having some role models or people that are there to communicate and have those kinds of conversations. But more than anything, it would be to have safe spaces for kids to continue being kids for as long as possible, right? Places where it's like, hey, it's safe to play and to be weird and to be silly. And like, instead of turning to bullying or whatever that might be, we can turn towards each other. So those are kind of the two things that show up for me. And I really appreciate what you're doing for the younger generation. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Sahil.
Yeah, that was great.
Yes, for sharing your vulnerability with us. We are going to continue with Obi's tradition in his honor and have our moment of community silence together. If you can stay, please enjoy this moment of silence. I'm going to put 2 minutes on my watch, and we will just be at peace and continue to think about what if the pattern breaks.
Okay.
I do want to say, well, just a few things. Thank you, Sahil, for this. This was great. I know the inner knowing is really resonating with me as a person who has a really great intuition and rarely trusts it. I'm very encouraged by your words today. So thank you for that. Before we go, Planet Word. Oh, that was fun. Planet Word has very graciously offered us first access into the exhibits today. So if you would like to explore, just stay in here after everyone else clear out of here. We're going to do a little orientation, and then you will be free to wander. Next month.
Next month,
Kaylee, what are we doing next month?
I'm so excited to announce next month, July 19th, our theme is trust, and we will be hosted at my offices at the Aspen Institute, courtesy of the arts program that I run at the Aspen Institute in the West End. So stay tuned for next month. We'll be in a brand new venue.
Yeah. All right, everyone, go about your day, please. Have a great weekend.